These controllers have potentiometer sticks, these controllers have Hall effect sticks, and these controllers have TMR sticks. But don't worry, I understand what they all mean so that you don't have to. Sometimes we don't need to know all the nerdy shit about a certain type of technology or product or feature. Sometimes we just need to know how it's going to affect us. So I'm going to simplify everything for you. Joysticks for dummies. No offense. Let's start with potentiometer joysticks. These things are pretty good. I mean, that would explain why we've been using them for the best part of 25 years. They do the job just fine. In fact, more than 90% of professional esports players go for this option. Their performance is acceptable, and since everybody's been using them for so long, it's just what we're used to. But there's a catch. Anywhere from 3 to 12 months of using these things and they'll start getting a little bit of a mind of their own. And in worst cases, they fail altogether and just stop working. So consumers have been asking for a new option. It's 2025, for crying out loud. Give us something worth buying. When this controller is like $180, you don't want to be buying a new one every 6 months, just so that your aim doesn't start drifting all over the place. Well, this is where companies such as GameSir offer Hall effect sticks. This controller is very, very popular. Since hitting the market, it's probably one of the most popular and positively reviewed controllers probably ever. Its reliability has been off the charts. People have been using these for nearly about a year and not experienced a single issue, failure, or anything. In fact, I've had my very own for about 7 months now and still works just like it did straight out of the box. So why hasn't this one developed any stick drift like the others? Well, this has got Hall effect sticks in, and what that means is essentially it does the exact same thing, feels exactly the same, but it's the way that it registers the input. It's got magnetic sensors in it that, without touching each other, detect whereabouts the position of the joystick is. And since there's no moving parts actually coming into contact with each other, nothing's there to wear out, which increases the lifespan, but also means no stick drift. So great, problem solved. Look no further. Only buy Hall effect joysticks. Wrong. As great as Hall effect joysticks sound, there is a downside to these detecting a magnetic field rather than being a potentiometer that actually physically comes into contact with something to detect its position. And that downside with Hall effect is, number one, the magnetic field can be disrupted pretty easily. For example, if you get any magnetic metal object and put it near the joystick while you're playing, it will look like it's starting to have a seizure. And since the input on these things are so easily disrupted, this can cause inconsistencies with gameplay. Many players often say that they have a little bit of a floaty feel to them as well, especially in fast-paced FPS games. And what they mean by this is that they can kind of feel that the joystick doesn't have a physical connection to what's underneath it. It is pretty much just floating mid-air. And for high FPS, fast-paced gaming, it is something that you will pick up on. And this is the number one reason why professional players, you won't really catch them using these kinds of things. Not only that, these are extremely high power usage. They require a lot more power than your typical potentiometer. What this means for wireless controllers is it can lead to a shorter battery life, which is why most Hall effect joystick controllers you'll find, like this one, end up being wired. This Vader 4 Pro from FlyDigi though, on the other hand, does have Hall effect joysticks. You can expect the battery life of this thing to be around 8 to 10 hours, which sounds perfectly fine, but if you compare that to something like the Elite Series 2 that has a battery life of approximately 30 hours with the exact same capacity battery, you start to realize the difference. Okay, so great, so we've got no stick drift, but I'm not going to play as good in my FPS games. Hall effect sticks are perfectly acceptable for most applications. If you do play somewhat competitively and are trying to gain an advantage in fast-paced FPS games, such as Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Halo Infinite, those kinds of things, the kinds of games where reaction time really plays a big part, Hall effect probably isn't going to be the smartest choice. But all is not lost, because that's where most companies are now interpreting TMR sticks. Now, TMR sticks, such as what we've got in GameSir's Cyclone 2 controller, as well as Mojon's Blitz 2 controller, we're going to see a lot of these. So at some point in the future, TMR sticks might be your only option. You might not really see any other type of joysticks on the market, apart from the odd one or two that we're seeing some other companies are experimenting with other capacitive type joysticks and some other new technologies. But again, very early stages for those at the moment, more information as we go along. But TMR sticks are probably going to become the industry's standard. And the reason for that is they work very similarly to Hall effect, as in they use magnetic sensors to detect a magnetic field to determine the joystick's input, but they do it in a very different way. The whole idea was to get Hall effect sticks and make them more like potentiometers. So, what are the two issues? Battery life. TMR joysticks use a lot less power. That's because the way that they detect the magnetic field just requires less power. That means wireless controllers like this one can have a longer battery life, unless the company decides to put a smaller battery in and only get about the same battery life. Sure. Or you could go for this controller from Mojon. So the Blitz 2 has, I believe, a 1000 mAh battery in it, so you can get between 12 and 14 hours out of this thing. So a little bit better. So we've solved the power usage. But what about that floaty feel? What about the inconsistencies? Well, because TMR sticks can get a reading without requiring as much power, they can respond to input positioning with much less effort. Not only that, the type of magnetic field that TMR joysticks get their data from, in a lot of cases they end up being actually more precise and more accurate and more responsive than potentiometer joysticks. So when you're looking for a controller and you're struggling on which one to buy, controllers with TMR joysticks are going to be pretty much the best option you can go for, and the longest lasting. In fact, if you ask me, TMR joysticks have kind of made all other Hall effect joysticks completely irrelevant, and I find it very difficult to recommend any controller with Hall effect sticks in it now since using TMR. But what you will notice is that controllers that have TMR joysticks generally will have a higher price tag compared to ones with potentiometer joysticks and Hall effect as well. As an example, GameSir's G7 SE with Hall effect joysticks, you can pick these up for anywhere between $35 and $50. And for a reliable, fast controller with a handful of extra features over your original Xbox controller, and the fact that it's officially licensed by Microsoft, that kind of deal is hard to beat. Whereas GameSir's up-and-coming G7 Pro that's available for pre-order now, this having TMR joysticks, as well as a few extra features that the G7 SE doesn't have, but very similar, this one's expected to set you back pretty much at a minimum of $80. I don't think you'll really find it any cheaper than that. Not with how popular it's become anyway. So if you want to save some money and you're not particularly competitive in FPS shooters, or you just play racing games, RPG games, single player titles especially, then Hall effect is absolutely fine. It's definitely going to do the job, and you can certainly save some money picking one of those up. If you do want to perform at your best and you are somewhat competitive, TMR is the way to go, no doubt. And I am yet to test out some bad TMR sticks. When it comes to Hall effect sticks, do still do your research and watch a couple of reviews on some controllers, because not all Hall effect sticks do perform particularly well. Some of them are very, very cheaply made and feel worse than others. GameSir controllers are a pretty safe bet. They are tried and tested, and tens of thousands of people will certainly vouch for them, one of them including me. So Hall effect has its place, but over time will slowly become irrelevant as more TMR joysticks hit the market. TMR is pretty much the best you can get at the moment, as they perform most of the time as good, if not better, than potentiometers, and you don't get stick drift. But does that make potentiometer joysticks completely obsolete? Well, not necessarily. As I said, most professional players will still opt for potentiometers just because it's what they're used to, it's what they've been using and training on for the last, well, the entirety of their career. But potentiometer sticks have also been developed further and further and have become more durable and more reliable over time. So the potentiometer sticks that we do have today compared to what we had 15 years ago certainly are night and day. Your standard PS5 controller comes with potentiometer sticks as well as the DualSense Edge. Currently a $200 controller labeled as a Pro controller, but it's actually just a standard DualSense with a couple of back paddles, and you can swap out the joysticks without needing a soldering iron. But apart from the durability issues in the stick drift, potentiometers just work. In fact, my daily driver is still a controller that has potentiometer sticks. And until you get some really bad stick drift on them, there's very little that you can complain about. But it's completely inevitable that potentiometers will be completely replaced within the next 2 to 3 years at the most, if not sooner, as more and more TMR sticks get adopted by other companies such as Scuf, Microsoft and Sony. If this video was helpful or entertaining, make sure you drop it a like, hit subscribe down below and turn on notifications so you don't miss a future upload. If you didn't like the video, go ahead and hit that dislike button. But I promise you, it's not going to change the fact that we're going to be cranking out more and more of these videos for as long as we can. So regardless of what you think, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.